There is a creature at the bottom of the ocean that marine biologists have handled hundreds of times, and still no one fully understands how it stays alive. It looks like an oversized woodlouse. It moves in slow motion. Viral videos have turned it into a kind of deep-sea mascot. But veteran researchers who have spent careers tagging great white sharks and descending into crushing ocean trenches treat this animal with a caution that its cartoonish appearance does not seem to justify. That gap between how it looks and how it behaves is exactly what makes it so unsettling. Its name is Bathynomus giganteus. It was pulled from the Gulf of Mexico in 1879 and single-handedly dismantled the scientific consensus that the deep sea was lifeless. Since then, the more we have learned about it, the less comfortable that knowledge has made us. Because one specimen at a Japanese aquarium stopped eating for over 5 years, it did not die. It did not visibly weaken. It simply waited, and nobody has been able to explain how. To understand why, you have to understand what this animal actually is, because almost everything the internet says about it is wrong. It is not a crab, it is not a shrimp, it is not a mutant, and it is definitely not the friendly deep-sea pet that viral videos have turned it into. Its scientific name is Bathynomus giganteus, which translates roughly to giant, deep dweller, and the name is not decorative. It was described for the first time in 1879 when a French zoologist named Alphonse Milne Edwards received a strange specimen dredged up from the Gulf of Mexico. At the time, most scientists still believed the deep sea was a lifeless desert. A pale armored animal, the size of a house cat, pulled from nearly 600 meters down, quietly ended that belief in a single afternoon. It belongs to the isopod order, the same group that includes the tiny pill bugs you find under damp stones in a garden. That relationship is the key to everything. A common woodlouse is barely a centimeter long. A giant isopod can reach 50 centimeters and weigh close to 2 kilograms. Imagine picking up a stone in your backyard and finding a woodlouse the size of a small dog underneath. That mental image is the exact reason biologists lower their voices when they describe handling one for the first time. The size is not the strangest part. The strangest part is that the animal is built to survive things no laboratory can easily reproduce. Its body is divided into overlapping plates of chitin, so thick and so precisely articulated that they function like segmented armor. When threatened, it can roll into a near-perfect sphere, tucking its legs and antennae inside a shell that resists crushing forces most predators cannot generate. Researchers who have tried to pry open a defensive isopod describe the experience as similar to opening a stubborn oyster with a butter knife. The animal is not fighting back, it is simply waiting, and it can wait longer than almost anything else alive. Underneath that armor, the anatomy reads like a survival manual for an environment that should be uninhabitable. Its 2 compound eyes contain nearly 4,000 individual facets, angled to catch the faintest traces of bioluminescence in water where sunlight has never reached. It has 7 pairs of legs, each ending in a small hooked claw that can grip bone, sediment, or the sinking carcass of a whale with equal efficiency. Its antennae, longer than a human forearm on the largest specimens, sweep the water constantly, detecting chemical signatures from dying animals kilometers away. Every part of the body serves the same purpose: to find food in a place where food arrives rarely, unpredictably, and always by falling from above. That is where the first uncomfortable fact about giant isopods begins. In the deep sea, at depths between 100 and 2,000 meters, calories are scarce. A single whale carcass drifting to the seabed can feed a community of scavengers for years. Giant isopods evolved to exploit exactly this kind of event. Their metabolism runs so slowly that individuals kept in Japanese aquariums have gone more than 5 years without eating a single bite and remained alive. One specimen at the Toba Aquarium famously refused all food for over 5 years before dying, still weighing almost exactly what it did on the day it stopped eating. Nobody knows how this is biologically possible. Nobody has been able to fully replicate the experiment, and nobody has been able to explain what the animal was doing internally during those years of apparent hibernation. That mystery alone would be enough to make researchers nervous, but it is not the reason marine biologists hesitate when the collection tank opens. The reason is what happens when a giant isopod does decide to eat. Under normal circumstances, the animal moves like a slow tank across the seabed, using its legs to shuffle through sediment in search of small prey or fallen organic matter. Baited camera traps, deployed off the coasts of Japan, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Western Atlantic, have recorded the same sequence dozens of times. A piece of fish is lowered to around 600 meters. Nothing happens for hours. Then, without any visible signal, a single isopod emerges from the darkness at the edge of the frame. Within minutes, there are 10. Within an hour, there can be more than 100 piled on top of each other, tearing through several kilograms of flesh with mandibles that operate like a set of curved industrial shears. Those mandibles are the reason the researchers are careful. A giant isopod's mouthparts consist of 4 separate cutting structures that move independently, powered by muscles anchored deep inside the head capsule. High-speed footage taken in Japanese laboratories shows the mandibles closing with enough force to sever the tendons of a large fish in a single motion. On a human finger, that same bite has been described by the few unfortunate technicians who experienced it as feeling less like a bite and more like being caught in a spring-loaded trap. The wound does not simply bleed. It stays open because the mandibles are designed to hold, not just to cut. Once the animal locks on, it does not let go until it decides to. There is a well-known incident, rarely discussed publicly, involving a research vessel operating in the Gulf of Mexico in the late 1990s. A crew member was helping transfer a live specimen from a collection net into a chilled holding tank. The animal, believed to be sluggish from the temperature change, appeared completely still. When the technician's gloved hand passed within a few centimeters of its mouthparts, the isopod moved faster than anyone on deck had ever seen one move. The mandibles closed on the fabric of the glove and did not release for nearly 40 minutes. The glove had to be cut away in pieces. The finger underneath was bruised, punctured, and, according to the technician, colder than it should have been. That last detail is what unsettled the biologists on board. Nobody could explain the cold. To understand why an animal built like a tank behaves this way, you have to understand what it is competing with in its own environment. The deep sea floor is not empty. It is crowded with grenadier fish, hagfish, sleeper sharks, and swarms of amphipods, all racing to consume any carcass that arrives. The giant isopod is not the fastest scavenger. It is not the most numerous. Its advantage is patience, combined with a bite that no competitor can match. When a food fall occurs, the isopod does not need to arrive first. It only needs to arrive, and then it holds ground. Footage from the northern Gulf of Mexico shows giant isopods physically pushing hagfish away from a tuna carcass, using their armored bodies as battering rams. The hagfish, which are themselves formidable, retreat. This is not a passive scavenger. It is a slow, methodical, and disturbingly deliberate predator when the situation calls for it. And that is only the behavior observed on the sea floor. What happens in the water column above is more difficult to study and considerably more unsettling. For decades, giant isopods were assumed to live exclusively on the bottom. Their heavy armor, their slow legs, and their reliance on sunken carcasses all suggested a strictly benthic lifestyle. But baited cameras suspended in mid-water at depths of 300 or 400 meters above the seafloor have occasionally caught something unexpected. A giant isopod drifting upward through open water, legs extended, antennae sweeping in wide arcs. It is not swimming in any conventional sense. It appears to be riding subtle currents, using its flat body as a foil. And it is doing this at night, when smaller animals migrate upward from the depths to feed. Nobody has directly observed a giant isopod capture a live fish in the water column, but the behavior is consistent with an ambush strategy that would be difficult to detect and even harder to survive. If that hypothesis is correct, then everything the public believes about this animal is wrong. It is not just a scavenger. It is not just a slow-moving cleanup crew for the deep sea. It is a patient, opportunistic hunter that spent millions of years perfecting a body plan that works equally well on the seafloor and in open water. The armor is not just defense, it is insulation, camouflage, and ballast. The slow metabolism is not just an adaptation to scarcity, it is a strategy that lets the animal wait, motionless, for opportunities that come once a season or once a decade. This is where the story becomes complicated, because the giant isopod is not alone. Or rather, the animal that biologists have been calling Bathynomus giganteus for over a century may not be a single species at all. In 2024, a team of researchers working in the Gulf of Mexico and the Sea of Japan published a study confirming what many specialists had suspected for years. What was thought to be one species is actually a complex of at least 20 distinct species, several of which had never been formally described. One of them, named Bathynomus vaderi because of the resemblance of its head to a certain fictional helmet, was identified from specimens sold in Vietnamese seafood markets, where locals had been eating giant isopods for generations without anyone in the scientific community realizing they were looking at an undescribed species. Another, larger than any previously known form, was found in waters off the South China Sea, reaching lengths that pushed the upper limit of what an isopod's body plan should physically allow. The implications are unsettling. If there are at least 20 species spread across every major ocean basin at depths ranging from around 150 meters to well over 2,000, then the total population of giant isopods on Earth is far larger than anyone previously estimated. And each species may have its own behavior, its own diet, its own hunting strategy. The animal that a Japanese biologist studies in the Sea of Japan may behave nothing like the animal a Brazilian biologist encounters off the coast of the South Atlantic. What was once considered a single, well-understood scavenger has become a group of 20 poorly understood animals, each with its own set of unknowns. There is also the question of what happens when a giant isopod dies, or rather, the question of why it seems so difficult to make one die under laboratory conditions. Aquariums that keep them in captivity report survival times of 5 to 8 years with almost no food intake. Some specimens have been observed going into what looks like extended torpor, remaining motionless for months at a time, then suddenly reactivating for reasons no one has identified. During these torpor periods, oxygen consumption drops so low that some researchers have questioned whether standard measures of metabolic activity even apply. The animal is not quite dormant. It is not quite awake. It is in a state that has no clean equivalent in vertebrate biology. The lack of a clean explanation is exactly what makes some scientists uncomfortable. Two competing hypotheses currently dominate the discussion. The first proposes that the giant isopod has evolved an unusually efficient form of cellular energy management, storing lipids in its hepatopancreas at concentrations far above what similar crustaceans achieve, and drawing on those reserves at a rate so slow it approaches the theoretical minimum for a mobile animal. Under this view, the isopod is essentially a living battery, charged during rare feasts and discharged over years of stillness. The second hypothesis suggests something more radical, that during long fasts, the animal shuts down non-essential organ systems in a controlled sequence, effectively hibernating tissue by tissue rather than as a whole body. This would explain the reports of isopods appearing dead for weeks and then reactivating, but it would also mean the animal possesses a level of physiological control that no other crustacean is known to have. Neither hypothesis has been definitively confirmed. Both may be partially correct. And there is a third possibility, less discussed in published literature, but occasionally mentioned in conversation among specialists, which is that the giant isopod's biology is genuinely alien enough that current models simply do not apply, and that new frameworks will be needed to describe what is happening inside its body during those years of apparent nothingness. There is one more detail that adds a layer of unease to the entire topic. Giant isopods have been found with parasites embedded in their gill chambers and mouthparts, small crustaceans that attach themselves to the host and feed on its tissues. This is not unusual in the marine world. What is unusual is that some giant isopods appear to tolerate these parasites for years without visible harm, while others react violently, dislodging them with movements so precise that researchers have compared them to a surgeon's hand. Nobody has been able to explain why some individuals tolerate and others resist. It suggests a form of behavioral flexibility that a heavily armored, slow-moving deep-sea invertebrate is not supposed to possess. It suggests, in other words, that there is more going on inside that armored head than the anatomy alone can account for. This brings the story back to the researchers themselves and to the caution they show when handling these animals. It is not the size that worries them. Larger creatures live in the deep sea. It is not the bite alone, though the bite is remarkable. It is the combination of factors that no single laboratory has been able to fully characterize. An animal that can wait years without food. An animal that can move faster than expected when it chooses to. An animal that may belong to 20 different species with 20 different behavioral profiles. An animal whose metabolism does not fit cleanly into any existing model. An animal whose intelligence, if that word even applies, has never been properly tested. And intelligence is a word that scientists use reluctantly when discussing invertebrates. The assumption has long been that animals without a centralized vertebrate brain operate on pure reflex, responding to chemical and mechanical stimuli in predictable, hardwired ways. The giant isopod complicates that assumption in ways that have not been formally published but are widely discussed at conferences and in laboratory corridors. Researchers have noted that captive specimens appear to habituate to the presence of specific technicians, showing different behavioral responses to individuals they have encountered repeatedly compared to strangers. Whether this constitutes recognition, learned association, or something else entirely is unclear, but it is not supposed to happen in an animal this simple. The nervous system of a giant isopod is distributed, decentralized, and by every classical measure inadequate to support anything resembling memory or individual recognition. And yet the observations persist, replicated across multiple facilities, never quite explained away. There is also the question of communication. Deep-sea crustaceans are not generally thought of as social animals in any meaningful sense, but time-lapse footage from baited camera deployments occasionally captures something that researchers describe with reluctance. When a group of giant isopods converges on a food fall, the feeding does not appear entirely random. Individuals that arrive together seem to position themselves with a coordination that is difficult to attribute to coincidence or simple chemical attraction. Some specimens hold back, while others feed, then rotate in. Others move to the perimeter and face outward in a posture that could, if you were inclined to interpret it generously, be described as sentinel behavior. No one has proposed a mechanism. No one has published a formal analysis of the pattern. But the footage exists, and the people who have watched it enough times have stopped dismissing it entirely. What makes all of this particularly difficult is the timeline. The giant isopod has been studied for nearly 150 years, and the pace of discovery has not slowed. If anything, it has accelerated. New species are being identified. New behaviors are being documented. New physiological puzzles are emerging from every laboratory that keeps specimens in captivity. The animal is not becoming less mysterious as technology improves. It is becoming more mysterious because better tools are revealing layers of complexity that cruder instruments simply could not detect. Every answer produces 3 questions. Every experiment opens a new corridor of unknowns. And the corridors, it turns out, go very deep. The deep sea covers more than half the surface of the planet. It is the largest habitat on Earth, the least explored, and the least understood. The giant isopod is one of the few animals from that habitat that humans have been able to observe, handle, and keep alive in controlled settings. It should, by now, be one of the best understood deep-sea animals in existence. Instead, it sits at the center of a growing cluster of unresolved questions that touch on metabolism, neurology, behavior, taxonomy, and ecology simultaneously. It is familiar enough to have a fan base on the internet. It is strange enough that the scientists who know it best are the least confident about what they know. Marine biologists are trained to work with unknowns. It is the nature of their profession, but most unknowns come with a manageable set of variables. The giant isopod comes with a set of variables that keeps expanding every time someone tries to close them. Every study raises more questions than it answers. Every new specimen adds to the list of things that need to be reconsidered. And every time a researcher opens a collection tank and sees those 4,000 facets of compound eye tracking their hand, there is a moment of hesitation that has nothing to do with fear of injury. It has to do with the awareness that the animal in the tank knows something that the human on the outside of it does not. The armor that protects the giant isopod from crushing pressure also isolates it from every attempt to understand it. The slow metabolism that lets it survive years of famine also makes it impossible to observe on any reasonable human timescale. The patience that allows it to dominate the deep-sea floor is the same patience that has kept its inner biology hidden from science for more than 140 years. Every advantage the animal possesses is simultaneously the reason it remains. In the words of one Japanese researcher who has spent his entire career studying them, the most familiar-looking animal in the ocean that nobody actually knows. Don't miss the next video either. It's just as fascinating, and it's waiting for you right now.